as it pertains to Red Bull at this track, only 3 drivers have won 5 consecutive races, being Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Michael Schumacher. Sebastian Vettel holds the record for 9 consecutive races. Nate, do you foresee Max making another step towards Vettel's record in Silverstone? It's like I asked this question, and it's like I asked the question.
Yeah, it was already quite difficult to say no, wasn't it? But I think it's becoming more and more obvious that that's where it's going. But then again, we spoke to Christian Horner about this on Sunday, and Horner is very much every time he gets the chance, he downplays the idea of this unbeaten season, and he pointed to last year's race. I mentioned it. Max last year, was in a really strong position and got some debris stuck under his car, and it ruined his race. And if you remember, he spent the rest of that race battling Mick Schumacher for I think 9th position, and which was probably one of the few times in this kind of era of F1 we're ever going to see Max fighting for that kind of position. So it can happen, and especially as Laurence mentioned, if it rains, it always throws that jeopardy in there. The problem with Max, and I don't mean the problem with Max, but the problem from a competitive standpoint is Max right now is just he's driving so well. You feel like he's every week it just seems like his level gets better. You think, okay, we feel like you've seen the best of him, and then he just pulls out more from, and suddenly the elements, how they might affect other drivers, don't seem to affect him in the same way. We saw 2 races at the weekend where he was just in complete control, and it's remarkable. So I would at this point put money on him.
Yeah,
definitely getting the 6th. And Vettel's record, if you look at the races coming up, they're all very, very winnable races for Max, and we've not seen any suggestion from him or from Red Bull. We haven't seen any issues with the car or anything like that might suggest that he's not going to get that. So yeah, my money would definitely be on Verstappen winning. And now I've said that, I tried to say that a few times so that hopefully I'll put the commentator's curse on it. But I don't know if I've done that or not. But yeah, hopefully, just for the sake of the season, I think it obviously if Max doesn't win, it's great. But I think the longer Max wins, the more I'm kind of actually intrigued to see him keep winning and see how many, like if he can extend that record out. Let's say he does get 9. Could he extend it to 10? Could he do 11, 12, 13? So it's quite an interesting one at the moment. And it's just basically Max Verstappen's world, isn't it, at the moment? And we're just all kind of watching it.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Austria was his 7th win of the 2023 season.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So Laurence, with that in hand, what would you place the over under of Max Verstappen wins this year?
So what was his record he set last year? Was it 14? Was that
we had 15.
Okay, so he's going to go, I'm going to say beyond that. So Checo already has 22 races. Let's go with 17.
17. Unbelievable. You mentioned Checo Perez, and he's had his fair share of struggles over the last month or two. Struggled again for part of the weekend in Austria before landing on the podium on Sunday. Laurence, just how would you describe what we've seen from Checo of late?
I think it's a guy under a huge amount of pressure and someone who's not really dealing with it that well. The qualifying record of what happened in Monaco and then Spain and then Canada and then Austria, 4 qualifyings in a row, not making Q3 in the fastest car. And there were bits of luck that came into it. There's some things that went against him. Weather went against him on occasion. Obviously track limits in Austria, but you don't see Max finding himself in the same situation. When Max knows he's got to deliver on a single lap because that's all he's got because the weather's coming in, he does it. Or when he's told you need to track limits, you need to keep it between the lines, he does it. So I think it's this guy under massive pressure, and I think a guy realizing that another shot at the title, which is what he had this year, is slipping away from him, and that's going to be pretty hard to take.
Did you get any sense, Nate, from Christian Horner of how he currently views Checo and what kind of future he possibly has at Red Bull?
It's hard to tell because everyone you talk to at Red Bull still says that Checo's there for the the duration of his contract, which runs until the end of next season. But you can see the frustration is starting to build, and especially when we spoke to Christian on Sunday, he said obviously that was after the podium performance that you mentioned, Katie, but the frustration was still there because it was this car should have been up here anyway. He shouldn't have had to fight through the field in the sprint race. He shouldn't have had to sorry, not in the sprint race, in the race itself. He shouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. And I think we've said it before, haven't we, that if Red Bull had a closer challenger this year, I really think the pressure would be higher because you could potentially be opening the door to a rival. Perez is very, very lucky that at the moment Red Bull's so far ahead, basically have the Constructors' Championship. It would take a lot for that not to happen at this point. So I think that that's a big factor as well. And I think that Red Bull have made changes before, and obviously they ended up in the situation where they went outside of the driver market to get, their driver academy to get Perez. I think what will be interesting is once we've seen Ricciardo is testing next week in Silverstone, that might change things. If Ricciardo tests and is very, very impressive, I think that we've talked about it before. He's leaning towards that AlphaTauri seat. But at the moment, Perez seems very, very safe, for Red Bull anyway. You never know if Helmut Marko is going to wake up one day and just say, actually, I want to change things up. But yeah, I think he's looking okay for now. But I think that the longer this goes on, and I think that podium was so key, because if he'd gone another race, another cycle of races without scoring a podium, I think that pressure really does start to mount. So if he can because all Perez has got to do really is stay out of trouble, and he should challenge for a podium every weekend. And if you're Red Bull and he's not doing that, you suddenly look around and you say, well, there's lots of other drivers here who could do that. I don't think they're expecting him to beat Max at this point. I think they're just expecting him to be competitive. And but no sense currently that they've lost patience with him. But I think, the early signs of that were there earlier in the weekend in Austria.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.